Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone and Kenny for another episode of Wuxia Weekend. Tonight we're going to be talking about Vampire Cleanup Department. This is a 2017 film. It sort of pays homage to the old Chinese vampire movies and films like Encounters of the Spooky Kind. This is it's sort of deliberately nostalgic. And it stars Baby John Choi, Siu-Ho, Richard Ng, Lo Meng, and Yuen Cheung-Yan. It also features Min-Chen as Summer, the human vampire in the movie. And so we're just going to get right into it. But before we do, I just wanted to get your guys' reaction to the movie. Adam, I know this was your first sort of hopping vampire film, and Kenny, I know you've seen them before. What was your, first response to the films?
I enjoyed it fine. I don't know if it's the most representative hopping vampire film or not. I don't know if most of them are like love stories with the vampire, but I don't know. It's not like as far as it, I don't know. It worked okay. It moved along pretty briskly. I wasn't like super involved in the movie, but I enjoyed it. I am curious to go back and watch some of the more classic hopping vampire movies based on it, though, to get a little context.
Yeah, for me, I enjoyed the movie, but from the opening, I was expecting it, like knowing nothing about the movie, I was expecting it to be a little bit more of a scary type of movie.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting Exorcist level of scary type of scary movie or anything, but I think it might be like a stab at like a mild horror genre, but. As the movie go on, it definitely has its more comedic moments and makes a jab at, I guess, sort of the what is viewed as like a beta male syndrome in Hong Kong. I thought the love story was sweet, and I think the music went along really well with those sort of sweet scenes as well, and the fighting was nothing to write home about, but it was still pretty decent. And I think as far as sort of hopping vampire movies go, this is fairly faithful to the sort of original depictions of vampires. Maybe I'm not so sure about is the whole infection thing. I feel like that might have been sort of lifted from zombie movies. I don't remember vampires in the past having the powers to infect people.
No, they were in some of the Mr. Vampire movies. They bite people and infect them.
Okay,
but
because I always thought they just drained them of their life energy and left corpses behind.
There's a few different kinds, and over time, it feels like they accrue more like concepts from Western vampires into them. I was saying this before the podcast, and we'll see if we have the opportunity to do it in the future. But I think it'd be nice to do a whole month at some point, obviously distant from now, because we just did a sort of horror theme month, but an all sort of hopping vampire evening of discussion, or a month. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Kenny, and I know we're supposed to get into the breakdown of the movie, but you mentioned a few things that I kind of want to talk about before we get there, which is, number one, I really like this movie a lot. In fact, I probably would have given it a 3 or a 4 out of 5 stars the first time I watched it. I don't remember what I said because I did a late night movie review and I talked about it, but I'm so exhausted when I do those that it's like a mind wipe the next day. But I probably would have given it a 3 or 4, and I probably am inching up closer to a 5 now on the second and the third viewing. I think I've probably seen it 4 times at this point, because I watched it 3 times this week, and so I found it had tremendous replay value, and a lot of the things that you called out were the things that I thought really worked. The music was really effective somehow. It kind of had like a Danny Elfman Sherlock Holmes vibe to it,
mm-hmm.
and it really.
I was thinking like sort of Wes Anderson kind of vibe.
Oh, that works too. No, that works too. My only complaint about the music was the mixing. Like, and my feeling is if that's my complaint, there's really not much. I didn't like the way it was mixed together. I felt like it could have been more seamlessly blended with the movie itself, but it still was like a very serviceable soundtrack that helped pull me in and help tell a lot of the story. Like the way that the melody was bouncing around, a lot of that is what paints the Summer character for you, and a lot of that is what sort of tells you the sort of it conveys a lot of the romance that's going on, and also the romance is a really big part of the story. I think that's the surprising feature of the movie, and it's something that you would normally expect to sort of not really work all that well, but this, for whatever reason, I can't put my finger on it because it's fairly simple, but for whatever reason the romance really works here. And also the thing that you said about how when you first started watching the movie you thought it was going to be very dark and like a proper horror movie. I feel like I don't know if it was intentional or not. I think it must have been. But the way it opens up a lot. There's another movie called Rigor Mortis, which is a much more straightforward horror vampire film that came out around, I think, before this one. I can't remember the release date. I think it was before this one. And it kind of felt like that. Like it had sort of the credits sort of vanishing in smoke and the really spooky music. And it feels like it's going to be that kind of film. And then within about 2 or 3 minutes, it just shifts gears, and it's almost like they were fainting.
Yeah, well, I got to admit, it's like my, you talked about subsequent viewings improving the moving for you, and I kind of gave a little lackluster opinion. Not that I disliked it, but just kind of felt average, because I think I was expecting something very different from this movie than I ultimately got, and it kind of took me a while to adjust. Because, I mean, I expected it to be comedic, the title alone kind of prepares you, but I was thinking more of a little more splattery horror comedy kind of thing than what we got.
Yeah,
I feel
like this falls solidly, but by Western definition into a rom-com category, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's this sort of the the Warm Bodies movie we were talking about before, where it's sort of similar themes going on with someone falling in love with something that they shouldn't, and
it also has an element of E.T. to it. I feel there's
yes,
like
I very much got that from it, and I mean the only difference from the Western rom-com template though is that it would never have the ending this movie would have necessarily. Well, actually, it might, but I don't know.
If it did, it would have to have like Will Ferrell in it or something. Like
no, I just remembered one that does have that ending. It's a Western. So I'm like, never mind. It would.
What part of the ending are you thinking of? Like the way it ends with all the action, or the way that it ends just in terms of story?
You could have action, just having her. Well, I mean, if we're getting into spoilers, having the ending with her sacrificing herself, but then I don't know if it's supposed to be her or just someone that reminds me of her, kind of reincarnated, but I don't know. It's
we have to get into that at some point, obviously.
That was a weird question there.
But no, and I think this obviously is going to be a spoilery discussion. But yeah, so the movie starts at the end. You sort of at the very final scene occurs at a mall, in a mall parking lot where the vampire is being lured to a final confrontation. And at the start of the movie, you sort of see the vampire cleanup department handling a vampire situation in the parking garage, and then you see the Tim character, who's the protagonist, and he gets stopped by a policeman, and the policeman asks him who he is, and he says, "Oh, you want to know who I am? I'll tell you everything." And he just goes into a narration of the whole film, leading up to that point, and his whole life. And that's when you really clearly understand the kind of movie it is, I think, when he's sort of like, okay, I'm going to tell you everything about myself. And
it's worth noting that the policeman is Eric Zhang as well, and I like him. Like he does his roles especially in comedy movies. Like he has very good timing and expressions. He
was perfect in it. Especially at the end after he's done explaining, and he's like, "I'm too tired to understand what you're saying. Just repeat every word that you just said over again." And it's like you said, it's the expressions on his face that make it super perfect. But yeah, so he gives his he sort of starts talking about his life, and we find out that he has a grandmother, and his grandmother's kind of crazy. They call her, what do they call her? The
garbage witch or something like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah, the garbage witch of Western District or something, and she always calls him by his father's name. His father's name was Lun, and she calls him Lun, and you can just tell that she's she sort of doesn't seem all together. And while he's out with her one night, he has an encounter with an old man and a little girl, and the old man ends up getting killed by a vampire in the alley, and he goes to help him, and he trips on a bottle, and the vampire bites him in the butt, and then he wakes up in his grandmother's house, and Uncle Chung and Chow are there, and they're we find out later 2 members of the vampire cleanup department who knew his family, and the key thing that happens here is for whatever reason he's apparently immune to vampirism. He isn't, he was bitten, but he isn't turning or anything, and so I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that part of the movie, or should I continue on?
Yeah, I enjoyed the sort of the introduction to the department. It was like sort of the whole classic, going up to a location and not quite putting a passcode in, but getting granted entry by someone who doesn't look like they should be have anything to do with vampires at all. Like it was a lady sat in the refuse disposal area, right? And she just like presses a button and then things open up. And I really like the look of the actual department, though. I thought it was very indicative or representative of what a vampire hunting department should look like. It's all the incense and the talismans hanging around, all the tools on display, and the furnace as well for boiling tea, apparently.
Yeah, he's using they have a furnace to
nice
incinerate
touch.
the vampires, and Uncle Chung is using it to make water for tea and for noodles, and yeah, I thought that was really cool when they go down in there and you sort of see the inner workings of the department. And they have the Taoist who does all the talismans and stuff. They have a guy who does weapons. They have they have the guy who ends up being his Shifu, who seems to be like the, I don't know what you call him, like the lead vampire hunter maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And
the entry is completely cliche. Like, it's something you've seen, but it just works. It's just like one of those things where it's like, yep, it's just the classic introduction to the secret department thing. But yeah, I really thought it was a good setup for the movie.
And then Uncle Chung, after he says that he wants to recruit him because he's immune to vampires, basically. And then we get a woman, they call her, in the subtitles, they called her Manager M. So she's kind of like the...
not parodying James Bond or anything at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And she says that the budget's been cut and she can't take on a new recruit. But Uncle Chung is pretty set on this. And then Tim says he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to work for them. He just wants to go home. And he has stuff his grandmother gave him to hand to them, and he just wants them to take it. And Uncle Chung goes for a walk with them and takes them to kind of like a little shack somewhere that's got all this memorabilia that are like pictures of Tim's
Well, he
parents.
also has the vampire fall on him on the way too, which has an effect.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, so as he's trying to leave the department, he bumps into a vampire that's sort of laid out with a talisman on its head and knocks it over, and the talisman comes off and it attacks him. And that's something that happens.
That was the vampire. That was the one that bit him in the ass.
I think it was, but that's like a really common thing in these movies. I feel like I've seen a scene like that in a bunch of the Mr. Vampire films. Maybe it was just one of them, and it's really memorable. But
it's like the unbeliever who runs into the supernatural and suddenly has a change of heart type of thing.
Well, not just that, but the vampires being laid out like that and falling over, or the talismans getting blown off their forehead, and it just always seems to be a thing. But he finds out that his parents were actually members of the department. They were managers of the department, and that they were bitten. And before they fully turned, his mother, who was pregnant, gave birth to him. And his father, we don't learn this at this time, but later on we learn that he handed Tim to Chow and told him to protect him, and then the father and the mother incinerate themselves. And go ahead.
So I just want to jump in here and just say that's basically what happened in Blade as well. I think like his mother was bitten while she was pregnant with him, and then when he was born, he became a daywalker. And I think that's what they're sort of going for, is the angle on why his blood is special. Is that it's because he was infected while he was an infant?
No, I think that's true. I mean, I don't know if they probably were possibly taking from Blade, but either way, it's definitely the that's, I think him being in his mother's womb when she was infected is what made his blood so special, because it's not just that his blood made him immune, but in not the next scene, but in the next portion of the movie where he goes on his first vampire hunting, they go to a marshy lake. And there's a vampire who was a landlord, and there's another vampire that was a girl that was like under his control, and they're both sort of under the lake, and the head vampire is sort of escaped, and they're tracking him, and Tim ends up having an encounter with the female vampire, which through a series of slapstick things results in his phone getting swallowed down her throat and into her belly. And this becomes a running joke over the course of the movie. But he falls into the water, and it's kind of like that classic scene where the man and the woman kiss each other underwater, and it's supposed to be the beginning of a love story. Except here she bites him on the lip, and I think his blood is what has the effect that makes her become more human. Because when we first see her, she's all, she looks like a vampire. Her skin is decayed and really like not healthy looking, and she's got she just looks like a sort of traditional vampire. And after she bites him, she becomes this beautiful woman, and then she seems to change, like her personality becomes more human. And we learn later on in the movie that he when he's looking through the vampire book, that she might be something called a human vampire. So I don't know. There's more to come, but obviously, like, what do you guys think of the lake hunting scene?
Reflecting back on it, it was actually perfectly cliche as well, wasn't it? It was the whole like oblivious main character like thanking someone for handing him an object while there's no one else around.
Yeah, that was very cliche. But yeah, at that point in the movie too, I wasn't sure where this movie was going. It's like this girl still could have been a monster and everything. It was so yeah, I still didn't quite have a read on, was he, what was this going? I kind of got the sense they might be going a romantic direction, but I was very unsure at this point of the movie.
Well, and what ends up happening is Chow and Uncle Cheung wound the head vampire, but because Tim gets bit and the woman she eventually rises up from the water and starts coming after him, he screams for help, and they run to help him, and the other vampire gets away, but it is still wounded, so it'll take time to recover. And they capture her, bring her back to the vampire cleanup department, and they put him in charge of cleaning her up and putting her in the incinerator. And he observes that there's a tear coming out of her eye. And Uncle Cheung looks at it. He says, "Oh no, that's just water dripping from the AC unit. That's not, And then the alarm sounds, and they all have to run off. And so they leave him alone to take care of her. And there's this.
I like their alarm. That has to be mentioned too. It's little chimes that turn.
Yeah, it's kind of got like a Ghostbusters sort of thing going on.
Oh yeah.
And so he's trying to put her in the incinerator, and it's just not working. The talisman comes off her head. She starts hopping around. She starts chasing him. This leads to, them going outside, and then she leaps on top of a car, and he has to get her down from the car. And again, she's a hopping vampire, so she's got her arms outstretched and her limbs are all stiff. And so it's just this sort of comedic, slapstick interaction. But once he gets her off the car, he takes her home with him. And that's when he sort of starts falling in love with her, and he decides to basically keep her at his house as he's training at the department. And I should say the thing with the car is also another running gag through the movie, where she keeps jumping on the same guy's car, and it leads to these very sort of confusing exchanges between him and the guy. But
The guy who plays the car's owner is like very apologetic. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, did I disturb you? And I think the tone comes across quite well, even if it's in Chinese. But it was just playing the sort of sniveling guy with no backbone, and it's just like trying to appease everyone. But
yeah, no, he definitely came across like that. And so then we get the extended training sequence where he's learning about the talismans. They're having him learn vampire defense from Lo Meng's character, and which I thought those scenes were pretty funny, where Lo Meng is trying to bite him in the back, and he's trying various ways to get him off of him, and from Chow he's learning how to sweep, and Chow is basically pulling a Miyagi and teaching him like all of the sweeping techniques, which later he's able to show him are actually self-defense maneuvers. And
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kenny. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that was at least I thought Mr. Miyagi's sort of training regime actually made sense. This one is just like, oh, no, what?
I actually expected to kind of like subvert it. I thought they were setting up to do like some kind of reversal on it, and I'm like, when they actually did it, I'm like, oh, they actually were going for that. Okay.
Yeah, it was a little silly because I did notice when I watched it again, he was giving him specific commands when he was doing it. So he was saying like sweep and then lift and then but they were not. It didn't seem specific enough. Like wax on, off was very specific movements. But it was. I guess it was interesting. You could sort of see it, but I think Kenny's criticism holds.
Oh yeah.
But basically he pulls a Miyagi, and he ends up revealing that he was actually teaching him the whole time, because leading up to that he's just acting like a jerk to him, and there is still some residual jerkiness, but it's really a result of him wanting to uphold his promise to the father to protect his son, and so after the training is all done, at the very end his final sort of test is to kill a vampire, and during the test he decides to demonstrate that they don't always have to kill the vampires. He's been reading up on them. He's been sort of feeding Summer with what is it, blood congee and liver.
Yeah, pig's blood.
Yeah. And so he tries to use that tactic with this with the vampire they want him to kill. It actually seems to be working, but Chow interrupts and throws a broom sword at him, for lack of a better word, and tells him to kill the vampire. And that throws off everything, and the vampire gets him in his clutches. And Summer immediately becomes aware that this is going on and runs to the vampire cleanup department to protect him. She leaps in, she knocks down the vampire, and Chow kills the vampire. He's about to kill Summer, and Tim protects her, and this creates a sort of rift between him and his Shifu, and so the Shifu goes off on a mission to get the head vampire on his own, and leaves Tim with the Taoist priest to sort of take care of the cleanup department, and then I think I got that wrong. I think Tim leaves with him, and then he gets sent home. And then the other department comes in to because they've been so I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but there's a rival department, and before the podcast we were trying to sort of figure out exactly what their role is, and we came to the conclusion they must be some kind of law enforcement department. And they have some kind of law enforcement power, whereas the vampire cleanup crew seems more of a civil public hygiene department.
Yeah, because I think the sort of titles that they used in Cantonese were reserved for either military or police personnel, rather than sort of more civil, more rather than people in health and hygiene, for example. So
well, and also we see at the beginning that Uncle Chung, when he tries to get the police out of there, he has to use subterfuge he has to trick them to leaving their post so that they can do their job without police interference, and so this other department is trying to create a cure for vampirism, and they think vampirism is a virus of some kind, and they're trying to employ sort of scientific methods. So they're sort of the opposite of how the vampire cleanup department works, and they end up taking over the vampire cleanup department just as Summer is there, and they use her. They grab her, they take her to a mall, and use her as bait for the head vampire, and so. During this time, Tim has a conversation with his grandmother where she's surprisingly lucid, and I think she hands him his father's broom, his broom sword, and tells him to rescue her daughter-in-law or her granddaughter-in-law, and all of the vampire cleanup department go back to the mall to deal with the head vampire, and there's a big final confrontation. The department that's trying to encroach, their tactic does not end up working, and they end up having to they get the floor mop with them, and and Summer ends up sacrificing herself by she basically she pulls the head vampire into sunlight and holds him in place and allows herself to burn so that he can be destroyed, and then there's an epilogue where we see Tim training the new cadets, and one of them physically resembles Summer. Her name is Winter, though, and she also seems to have a very similar personality. And also we learned that they used his blood to create a vaccine. Because his Sifu was bit in the neck during the final fight, and it's revealed that he was cured using Tim's blood. So I don't know. What did you guys think of the ending of the movie and the sort of the final confrontation?
I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest, because I on one hand, I would have been perfectly happy with the sort of movie ending, without the appearance of Winter, because then that would still mean that he's still got a valuable lesson that vampires aren't all bad, and you could have a slightly bittersweet ending, leave it open ended on whether he finds true love in the end or not or whatever. The introduction of Winter sort of violates principles of reincarnation and all that. It can't be the same person, but if there's I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's just I'm not really quite sure how it works, because she's literally just died recently, and then she ascended or whatever.
The afterlife exists beyond time and space, so you can technically reincarnate before you die. It all makes perfect sense.
Technically, the names and dates of everyone who's ever going to die is written in the Book of the Dead, right? In Chinese mythology, so it could be true.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how to sort of square that. Maybe there's an explanation with the different divisions of soul, of the components of the soul, but I thought it was a little bit odd. On the one hand, I liked it. I liked that he got the happy ending with Winter. On the other hand, it's the part that every time I watched it, I was trying to figure out, well, how does that work? And I could never come up with an explanation. And so I think it falls victim to exactly what you're talking about. But so because the whole thing that they're saying about vampires is as long as they're vampires, they can't reincarnate. So it's clearly supposed to tie it to that. That seed is planted in the movie, but it doesn't. It's kind of it just doesn't. This woman has clearly been alive for many years, so it just doesn't work. It's
it worked. So I thought her sacrifice worked really well, because she's kind of showing she's happy about it. Look, I'm gonna go reincarnate now. I'm ready. It's been nice, but I'm moving along, and it it wasn't like it was some tragic ending that needed to be fixed. It was sad. It's like, you know, he doesn't get to be with her, but it wasn't a terrible ending before that.
Unless this is like 18 years later and he just looks surprisingly youthful. But
I didn't think about that angle.
That's definitely not what was going on. It's just it was but I mean, there's like a lot of Pusong Ling stories where a guy falls in love with like a ghost or something like that, and then, you know, she's able to reincarnate because of something he does, and then 18 years later he marries her, you know what I mean? And it makes sense chronologically, and it feels like they were trying to do something like that here, and they kind of hand waved the very important passage of time that would need to occur.
We just fill it in with our imaginations.
He did have a different hairstyle, so that could be the indication that 18 years had passed. But yeah, I got to say, my stray thought I just had actually is that it's kind of ironic that the people obsessed with it being a virus and so on were the police-related ones, but the health and sanitation department were the ones that like, let's just go out and kill them. So it's that's kind of a interesting twist there.
Well, and also they had the Western actor in the role of the scientist.
Yes.
Stephen, right?
Surprisingly good.
Yeah, but it was always that funny thing because every time he got to the word virus, it kind of stood out in the sentence.
Perfectly pronounced words, and then like sort of slow stuttering.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit, but yeah, I was interested. I expected him to come back at some point. It felt like they were setting that guy up to, like, you know, I was expecting him to show up at the end of the movie as part of the whole big operation, but no.
Were you thinking he's going to be the big bad who was trying to use the vampire's blood to create an army or whatever?
It could have anything, just anything. I just felt like, you know, it seemed like they were, you know, singling that guy out to be important for some reason, but nope, he was just there to say virus a lot.
And tick diversity boxes, I guess. We have a white person in our movie.
Yeah, he really they thought he would really draw in the American audience, but
we were all there to see Steven. That was our
Who played Steven? Do we have a name for the guy? Dean Head.
Yeah, I don't know who he is. He looked familiar.
He's only been in one movie, apparently, according to Hong Kong Movie Database.
When I first saw this, I can't remember the actor's name. He's a very famous actor, but the guy who plays what's his name in Harry Potter? I should know this. The really big guy in Harry Potter. What's his name?
Oh, Hagrid?
Hagrid, yeah, the guy. I thought it was the actor who played Hagrid in Harry Potter but it definitely wasn't. It definitely wasn't. But yeah, but I did like the ending. I do agree with Kenny that it does it logically it breaks down, and I find it very sort of frustrating every time I see the end because I'm trying to get those two things to connect, and they just won't. But obviously, if anybody's listening and they have a theory, we're open to hearing it. We'd love to hear, you know, if you have an opinion. But yeah, so I guess one thing I want to know is what's up with the glasses in the movie. Why? You know how like he's got the thing where he wears the glasses, but it turns out he doesn't really need to wear the glasses, and
I think that might be a jab at Hong Kong culture or young culture, because there are loads of people who wear fake glasses, and I think even in Western countries as well, there are loads of people who pretend that they need glasses.
Okay. They were hipster glasses, I think is the term.
Even lensless glasses, or they just want to wear the frame.
But I got the impression that the glasses were actually blurring his vision too. Like she said, like take off the glasses and look at, you know, like look with focus or something, and then that's when he sees what, like it says like HN on the handle of the sword, I think.
That's not what it says on the handle, but they're trying to imply a word, but I can't tell what the word is because it's written in like cursive Chinese, so I have no idea what.
Yeah, I was not. I assumed it must have had something to do with his parents, but I didn't really know what that was.
I can't remember. I know that the father's name was Long, right?
The mother's name was Ling, I think. I can't remember what his father's
Right.
name was. His father name might have been Lung.
Because that's what the grandma was calling him all the time was Lun.
Oh, Lun. Yeah, Lun. Lun
Yeah.
was his name.
Of course.
Yeah, because she keeps calling him Lun, and then in the very end she calls him Tim, and he's super surprised by it.
Yeah. So I couldn't quite figure out whether it was actually his father's old sword or a different sword with a different word on it. But it makes the most sense as the father's sword.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to assume. I'm going to assume it's his father's sword. Just because the other sword they gave him, his Shifu snapped in half, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a lot of legacy swords being handed down to
Yeah.
him, unfortunately.
Well, and that way,
I think
been
his
one
sword
that
was
they
crafted
made.
for him. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like a new joiner type thing. You get your
Yeah,
laptop.
that's
You get a
true.
laptop if you go to a
Yeah.
corporate environment.
Government.
If you go to the VCD, you get a wooden sword in
Government issue. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. Were there any things that we didn't cover on our discussion of it that you guys think we should bring up?
But I guess we should talk about the romance because I think that is an integral part of the movie. I do like how it was very sort of show don't tell type. I don't know. Maybe it was being very blatant with the way they were showing it, but to me it was still very sort of show don't tell in the way that they depicted the characters falling in love, despite the fact that neither of them really said "I love you" or "I like you" or anything like that.
I think that's why it works. I think it's because it's like a mime. It's like it's all physical sort of comedy and physical performance and because like you said, she isn't talking and he talks a little bit, but primarily it's sort of the physicality of it. And so I think that it sort of reduces it to its simplest, almost like it just and in one sense you can kind of project anything you want onto that. But in another sense, I think it gets rid of a lot of the clutter that you might sometimes have in romance stories. So it's just sort of very simple and innocent.
Yeah. Made me think of Wall-E, actually, which has the whole section with the robots being silent for about the first half of the movie.
Yeah, it kind of has that, and I think that's also why I was thinking of E.T. like the it's just that kind of. I don't know. It just sort of works, and I also think I think it's interesting, sort of, using sort of the nature of the hopping vampire that way. Like I know they did something kind of similar in Mr. Vampire 2. I think they had a little kid that was a vampire, and his role was basically to be cute the whole movie. And so so it's kind of similar to that, where it just kind of it's sort of silly having these two things in this like this evil vampire and this cute kid. And so in this case she's kind of like a the adorable object of his affection and a vampire, and it's kind of an interesting combination.
Yeah, I was wondering early on, when he first took her home and stuff, I thought, man, is this going to be kind of like in Dead Alive, where he's keeping his grandmother in the house, but she's totally a zombie and she's killing people. And he's just trying to pretend that life is normal. I thought, is this going to be a situation like this where so I had this much darker movie running in my head there for a little bit, but it went in a sweeter direction.
Yeah, this is definitely not a dark movie. It's a very sort of, it's a feel-good movie. It's a feel-good
It's
hopping
rom-com. I think rom-com is just I can't think of any other way to describe it. Down to the sort of happy ending elements there. You can't have a rom-com ending on a sour note. Like it's a bittersweet is the lowest they'll go.
Yeah, and I mean obviously she gets burned up, so there is like that. But you get sort of the they sort of take that away when they introduce the Winter character. But yeah, because even the scene the scene where they're on the couch watching TV is like very, very rom-com. So yeah, but I don't know. I thought the romance worked. And
I think the music, I guess, during the sort of the scenes where they interact is also, we talked about it. I think we mentioned it before the podcast, not during it, but
because her performance is very physical, and the music is very physical, and it matches her performance, and you get the sense of her movements with them. I just feel like those two things are really tied together. The music has a bouncing quality to it, and I thought that the melodies and the chords were all, I don't know, I kind of like them. So it for me it worked. Again, my only complaint about the music is the mixing.
I can't quite remember, but did you notice like the music sort of shifting from sort of the bounciness to like a smoother melody as she became more and more human? I don't know if that was a thing or not.
I didn't happen to notice that, but I think that the music, they were playing that same theme in different forms, and so at one point you hear it on a piano and it's very sort of drawn out and not as bouncy, and then they would play it with other instruments, and so they seem to be doing something like that throughout the movie. I don't know. We could probably sit down and just listen to the soundtrack and try to analyze it, but but either way, I think the music was really effective here. And I don't know. What about the Well, Adam, I want to ask you, because you haven't really been exposed to this genre before. What's your, just based on this movie, what's your sense of this genre?
I liked the whole element of it. I liked the way they had, him looking in the book when he was kind of looking up, trying to find something about this vampire, the book with all the pages for the different types of vampires and so on. That got me curious. I'm like, oh, are these actually evoking particular vampires in other movies, or? But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's probably not a typical form of the genre, but I would like to see another one here sometime soon. So if we're gonna do Vampire Month, I'm ready for it.
Well, and you did get you got her character, which is the sort of more human-like vampire, but you did get the real vampire too.
Yeah, we did. I mean, what we got of real vampires was effective.
How do you think they compared to Western vampires? Like, what was your,
Well, I like the fact that they were. I mean, it's hard for me to say this considering how human she is, but the ones we did see, the other ones were pretty monstrous. It's like, Western vampires have become pretty kind of sanitized over the years. And I mean, I guess this movie is going in the same direction, but it still at least had monstrous vampires in the movie as a contrast.
Yeah, I feel that those kinds of they remain more frightening when they're monstrous like that. Like I definitely do have I do like sort of the Western vampire and the role it fills, but I find these vampires have more fear potential. Like it's just more frightening. It's
kind of a weird choice giving him the immunity, because like plot-wise, the immunity didn't do a whole lot once you got past that initial time he was bit. And it's like it kind of did take some tension. I mean, maybe they didn't want it to be tense, but I mean, it's like you're never worried about her biting him or something because it's like, oh, he's immune. But I mean, I guess at the end that they do make the vaccine from his blood, so it does kind of pay off in that way. But that's really kind of more in the epilogue than the main thread of the story.
Yeah.
Maybe if I wanted to do like a Vampire Kingdom Part 2, we could have like the vaccine is actually not a good thing, and that is actually turning people into vampires.
That was the other question I want to ask you. Do you think this movie should get a sequel? Because it kind of ends on a note where they could easily go into a sequel if they want to. But do you think that would be a good idea, or would you want to see more movies that this one sort of launches, or do you think it just needs to end with this film?
I don't think any rom-coms have had a good sequel.
I'm trying to think of one.
Bridget Jones's Diary.
But this is still a hopping vampire.
I know. I know this is a hopping vampire. I guess they could sort of
like you could.
They changed the genre. You'd have to change the genre.
No, because I think you can still do it. Like the Bride with White Hair kind of is a sequel with different characters, right?
Yeah.
Like I know that the character showed up, and they still played a very key part of the story, but they weren't technically the sort of main characters of the second movie.
Well, and a lot of a lot of the Mr. Vampire movies, it's just like a completely different situation and stuff each time. So,
yeah, I mean, because the issue you're talking about there being no good rom-com sequels, it's like the issue there is that it's like the movies always have the characters have some kind of huge obstacle they get past, and they have to. Then at the end of the movie, they get together, and the sequel is let's put another big, huge obstacle in them and have them like not be getting along or whatever again, and always like it negates that happy ending you got in the first one, you know. But I don't know. That's my problem whenever they do a sequel to them.
And then plus, I guess Summer is technically dead. So
Summer is well, like I said, you'd have to do it with Winter being the love interest, and it's like, well, would that mean you'd have to have some obstacle with him getting together with Winter, or would you just go a different direction with it, or I don't know.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Her actual reincarnation comes back to find them after.
Yeah, that's right. It turns out, the reincarnation actually looks nothing like her. So, he's fallen in love with the wrong girl. And
that would actually make a very interesting sequel, I think. If Summer came back because she was jealous that
she got memories from the past life or whatever of their love, and finds him happily married to a woman called Winter who looks exactly like she did when she was in her previous life.
Let's get a screenplay together this weekend and we'll send it out.
But yeah, I don't know. I kind of would like to see a sequel, but at the same time, I think just ending it and having it be this one-off is probably better.
I mean, it's a good cast. I'll say that. I mean, bringing these people together for another movie, I wouldn't mind. From that perspective.
Yeah, a cast sequel would be cool. A cast sequel would definitely work here. I am in agreement. But yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts on the movie before we head out?
Just a minor thought, which is this movie really flies by. I've got to say, I mean, it is only an hour and a half long, but almost all the movies we review are in the hour and a half range, and it's like it was just over in no time at all.
That's something I want to talk about actually before we go. Is one of the reasons why I really liked this movie more and more every time I saw it is because, like the first time I saw it, it made an impression for sure. Like I knew when we did it on the show that people were going to have opinions about it. It would be good fodder for conversation. But usually, sometimes when you watch a movie, it's great, the first couple of times. But if you rewatch a bunch of times, it can lose a little bit of its luster. And this was one which just kept getting better every time I watched it. I don't know why. I think I just was appreciating it more with each viewing, and that made it really easy to watch. And I think that it had almost like a Back to the Future quality to it, where the script is just really tight. And so, there are like a lot of cliches in the movie, but that's kind of by design, and they're really done well. And so I think that it just brings all of its ingredients together very efficiently, and it doesn't waste any time. It's not incredibly short. It's not incredibly long. It's about an hour and 30 minutes, so it's fairly average length for a movie like this. But it just kind of it doesn't feel like any effort at all to watch the movie. It's very engaging every time you watch it, and time flies, and I think that's the sign of a decently done movie. So I think the pacing is really good. But yeah, I don't know. So I don't know. Anything else before we head out?
I think I'm all out. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I need to watch a few more Hopping Vampire movies before you say anything. But I feel like this movie is probably not the best introduction to that sort of world. I mean,
that's my feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though I enjoyed it, I don't know if it was the best place to start.
I mean, they did sort of go a bit into the sort of the background and lore of vampires, which is, I think a key feature of the genre is using knowledge to surpass these, feral beings of like ungodly strength, rather than love and affection or whatever.
Well, I think the best place to start is probably Mr. Vampire or Encounters of the Spooky Kind, but I also think like this might be an okay introduction if it's giving somebody a taste that there is this deeper genre. And like sometimes you'll watch like a later movie that's part of a series or something, and it'll pique your interest in finding out what happened before. So I could see this doing that.
What I'd say is, if my feeling from my limited perspective is if someone said, "Hey, I really want to see a hopping vampire movie," this probably isn't the one to give them. But I wouldn't say, "Don't watch this if you haven't seen any other hopping vampire movies," because it's a good movie either way.
Yeah,
but it's just not something you choose as an introduction to the genre. That's all.
But I would agree with what both of you were saying. I would just say that I think this movie probably is going to be a film that gets people into the genre simply because it has that. I think it's a. It definitely you can tell it's bringing in all of these elements from an existing genre of filmmaking, and so it's gonna naturally make people curious, especially the more they learn. If they they go online and read a little bit about the movie, they'll obviously find out. There are more movies out there. A lot of the cast was in these movies, and so I think a lot of people are probably going to begin their journey backward with this film. But like Kenny said, I think you're probably better off starting with like Mr. Vampire or something. And those movies really hold up too. I have to say, I think they hold up. Maybe I'm just used to watching older movies, but I think they really do hold up. We'll be back on next week. I think what are we watching next week? Opium and the Kung Fu Master.
I can tell you in just a second. It is Opium and the Kung Fu Master, tentatively.
All right. So provided that is the movie, which I think at this point it probably will be, we're gonna watch Ti Lung sort of, sink into the depths of addiction to opium. And
excellent.
It's an interesting movie. And then also, as always, we have a Patreon. We'll post a link in the description. Feel free to contribute. It helps us with paying for movies because sometimes these things are not available on say Prime or Netflix, and we need to get hard copies of the film for everybody. We appreciate every contribution, and you can also listen to our other programs on the channel. Me and Adam, are currently doing our Torchwood discussion. I think we probably have another episode of Game Lab coming up, the RPG Game Lab.
We are due for that. I know Rob just got done working on a book, so he's probably got some free time to pull him into something.
We'll have to see what's on his mind if he just finished a book, because that might be fodder for discussion. And we also have an upcoming Wuxia workshop. So we will be back on, and we will talk to you later.